This message comes from Intuit TurboTax. Now, Taxes is matching with an expert backed by tech to get you the most money back at TurboTax.com. Experts only available with TurboTax Live. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident.
First of all, Hispanics love Trump. They do.
In the wake of the last election, much was made about the so-called, quote-unquote, Latino vote.
One of the very important keys to Donald Trump's victory was getting a larger share of votes from Latinos.
Historically, Latino voters have leaned blue, but this election saw a major shift, with more Latinos than ever voting for Trump. And while this left many pundits puzzled, there's a growing movement that might explain why some Latinos are finding a new home on the right. Latino evangelicals.
Bueno, la pregunta que tenemos que preguntarnos es ¿qué es lo próximo que va a llenar la tierra?
That service you hear is being led by Pastor Samuel Rodriguez, the president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. Pastor Rodriguez is just one of a growing number of church leaders looking to the Latino community to grow his flock.
Over the last 20 years, white evangelicals have gone from being nearly a quarter of the U.S. population to only 13. And so it's been in that period of white evangelical decline that really, frankly, by necessity, they tried to look, well, where else can we find members?
You've also had a movement in Latin America and the United States where evangelical, charismatic Christians has been very aggressive in the community in recruiting new members.
My guests, Robert P. Jones from the Public Religion Research Institute.
Great to be here.
And Axios Justice and Race reporter Russell Contreras.
Good to be with you.
Have been following this shift for a while. Now, let's be clear. No group is a monolith. And the reasons behind these demographic shifts are nuanced, to say the least. But Robert and Russell have noticed some links between the Republican Party and the emerging evangelical movement.
Some groups are aligned with Republican parties, right-leaning groups, and they can get voting lists. So they can say, okay, well, let's go to this neighborhood where people have around this income, and let's go to those Latinos or these Spanish surnames who are politically unaffiliated. They refuse to state. Those are ripe for picking.
And they have questions about why the evangelical movement has chosen this moment to court its new members.
Not to be too cynical about it, but why are the doors flying open among many white evangelical churches to Latinos when in the past they've not been open?
Today, Robert and Russell break down what's at the root of this shift and what it means for our political future. When we talk about Latino evangelicals, what does that group actually look like?
They're fairly fluid, and I'm thinking in terms of politics. For example, like Latinos as a whole are not as tightly tied to partisan identity as, for say, white Americans are. So there's a lot more of a fluid situation. But Latino Protestants in particular have been moving toward the Republican Party over the last 10 years. If you look between 2013 and 2023, the percentage of Latino Protestants who identifies as Republican has more than doubled.
Oh, wow.
It went from 17% to 37%. And that's a really different picture than, say, among Latino Catholics, among whom 44% are Democrats rather than Republicans.
You know, that's so interesting because when I think of Latinos in America, I usually think of the Catholic Church. But I read that as of 2022, only 43% of U.S. Hispanic adults identified as Catholic. And that number is down quite a bit from 67% in 2010. And it looks like this turn to evangelism is part of that decline.
And we'll also see them when the denominations. So where you see a large growth among evangelicals, it's among the Assembly of God, Pentecostals.
Yeah, that's right.
Baptists, right? Even the LDS. They're going toward these charismatic Christian groups. And I would also say one thing that really is drawing them is when Latinos get older, they get married, and they want to stay in the Catholic Church. They have to go through all the processes that we all did. baptizing children, bringing up documents.
It's a lot of steps.
Evangelicals offer a one-step shop saying, no, just jump into this pool and be baptized and have a born-again experience where everybody's cheering you on.
Now, you used the word charismatic to describe some of these denominations that are attracting a lot of Latino evangelicals. Some listeners might not know that charismatic has its own specific meaning within the Christian church. Can you talk to us about what that means so we can get a greater sense of what y'all are saying?
It is both a kind of style and a set of beliefs. On the belief side, it's a belief that sort of God is still raising up prophets, for example, inside of the church that may be filled with the Spirit and offer new prophecy to God and kind of ecstatic utterances inside of a service, for example. It also tends to be a more emotionally expressive style of worship. So lots of raising hands, sometimes speaking in kind of spiritual tongues. It's that kind of thing. A lot of kind of vibrant music that looks much more effervescent, let's say, than your standard kind of liturgy that you would see like at a Catholic mass.
Yeah, you can go in front of these charismatic churches and testify and tell the whole congregation your struggles.
Oh, yeah.
And why are you coming to God? Why have you found Jesus? I've crossed the border. I've done this. I've struggled with addiction. And now I'm here. And you can lay it all out there. Don't feel you're being judged. There's a powerful response where people are saying, amen, keep going. We got your back. It's a very powerful experience if you feel alienated, if you feel marginalized, and then you go into a storefront where everybody is holding you up and saying you're doing the right thing. It's a very powerful experience that can transcend generations.
Wow.
The one thing I would add here too is that it's an entrepreneurial space, particularly for Latino leaders, right? So if you think about what does it take to be a Catholic priest, right? Well, it takes years of seminary and it takes getting approved by a bishop. There's structures in place that you have to kind of do. But what does it take to be a pastor? Sometimes your credentials are the experience people have of you being baptized by the Spirit. So it means that it is a kind of open entrepreneurial space where leaders can gather a flock and open up a church.
Robert, you were quoted in a piece by Russell, and you said that a big reason why so many Latinos are joining the evangelical church is maybe not Americanization as like the driving force, but like it is some type of outcome. There's Americanization wrapped up in this transition or in this shift. Talk to us about how the church might offer or symbolize Americanization to new members or people who are going to be joining.
Well, in many ways, the sort of evangelical experience, is something that really did come of age in the American context, right? So that kind of white, predominant evangelical way of being Christian is a kind of American phenomenon.
Absolutely. I'm from Michigan, and it's very popular across my state, but also popular in the South, but also popular out West.
Yeah. And then wrapped up in it, too, I think is often a strain of kind of aspirational upward mobility that's kind of compatible with this idea of the American dream, right? And so I think that's also wrapped up in it. And it sometimes gets wrapped up theologically in a kind of health and wealth gospel so that there is a kind of upward mobility, path to success, good family, health and well-being, along with economic success.
Those are very, I think, American ideals, as a package.
Right.
Yeah.
All wrapped up with a kind of deep theological foundation altogether.
You may have heard Jesus as this humble carpenter who is with the poor, and that's what the text says. All of a sudden, he's transformed into Jesus can be a self-help guru where he can give you financial tips. The prosperity gospel, Jesus has turned into a crypto bro. He can give you stock tips in certain cases. That's a very American thing. And what you see in these evangelical spaces, especially with Latinos, they're adopting it. I have to say there's a split too. Most of what we've been talking about are the majority of what we see. The Spanish language ones, the marginal ones, there's also this growing movement of pushing back where they actually say, no, Jesus was poor. You are actually the same thing. You were experiencing the same thing he did. He had to flee and go to Egypt when he was a baby. He was poor. He struggled, and they didn't believe him, and they persecuted him. You are exactly this person. You're facing deportation. You share experience. I want to say this also. I saw this in Brazil and New England, that they're saying, no, you are being marginalized. You are being disrespected. The kingdom of heaven is yours, but this is what you have to go through. Do not think that all this persecution is in vain. There's something else waiting for you.
That sounds so aligned with liberation theology, and it sounds so aligned with a lot of the things that I heard growing up going to a Black church, that your suffering is something that's not in vain. Coming up, some of the tactics these churches are using to court new members.
Okay, there's a Starbucks and a yoga place that have recently opened in this neighborhood, right? So that means there's a kind of upward mobility gentrification trend happening. It's ripe to kind of drop a church in there.
More on that and what it means for our political future. Up next.
This message comes from Schwab. At Schwab, how you invest is your choice, not theirs. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices. You can invest and trade on your own. Plus, get advice and more comprehensive wealth solutions to help meet your unique needs. With award-winning service, low costs, and transparent advice, you can manage your wealth your way at Schwab. Visit schwab.com to learn more.
This message comes from Grainger. As a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, you know that vintage charm historically needs constant attention, which is why when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them, the right tools and supplies are never far away, so you can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This message comes from BetterHelp. Every January brings you 365 blank pages waiting to be filled. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Therapy can help you craft the next chapters with purpose. BetterHelp offers therapy 100% online with a diverse network of over 30,000 therapists worldwide. Visit BetterHelp.com/NPR today to get 10% off your first month.
You know, you all discussed two major views of Jesus that you're seeing within the Latino evangelical community. How do these two major views of Jesus shape the politics of Latino evangelicals overall?
Well, maybe one way of kind of seeing this clearly is to look again at the difference between Latino Protestants and Latino Catholics here, in terms of politics, just to sharpen this up. So in the last election cycle, PRI's post-election survey showed that among Latino Protestants, 64% of them gave their votes to Trump. All right, nearly 2/3 voted for Trump. If you compare that to Latino Catholics, it's only 43% of Latino Catholics who voted for Trump. In fact, 55% of Latino Catholics voted for Harris. So you see this kind of divide in the politics. You can see it on issues as well. So on abortion, for example, there's a big divide between Latino Catholics and Latino Protestants. Only 41% of Latino Protestants support the legality of abortion, but 58% of Latino Catholics support the legality of abortion. So there's this big divide. So, both of these groups believe in Jesus. Both of these groups are Christian, right? But it's the way that kind of that cultural and the kind of evangelical Catholic split kind of really refracts those same religious beliefs into very different political directions.
Wow. So, obviously, a big part of evangelical Christianity is, going out and telling the good news. But how are these evangelical churches attracting so many new members? Talk to me about those tactics.
Well, some of it's good old-fashioned shoe leather. Some evangelical churches do this on a weekly basis, kind of send people out to neighborhoods to knock on doors, leave brochures, and then there's also a really powerful digital space now that has grown up over the last, 50 years to accompany these kind of older methods.
There's also some micro-targeting.
Yeah.
Some groups are aligned with Republican parties, right-leaning groups, and they can get voting lists. So they can say, okay, let's go to this neighborhood where people have around this income, and let's go to those Latinos or these Spanish surnames who are politically unaffiliated. They refuse to state. Those are ripe for picking. So they'll go, and I've got to say, as a journalist, I do not register for any political party, to be fair, but because I'm in a certain neighborhood and I'm a politically independent, my door is constantly getting knocks from various churches. Hey, we noticed that, you're not a member of our church. Are you a member of any church? They want to have those conversations. During COVID, I was getting calls, say, are you okay, Russ? And I was like, at first I'm thinking, wow, somebody's caring about me. oh no, we're just around the neighborhood. We know you and this is that. If you've gone through a hard time, if you're vulnerable, you are very much going to respond to that message like, wow, these people really care for me. I want to get more of that juice. I like the way that tastes. Where can I go to get more of this? Glad you asked. We're having a service on Sundays and Wednesdays. Why don't you come down and bring your wife? Little things like that. It's a combination of macro targeting and old-fashioned word of mouth. That macro targeting, to me, I think is very efficient and has been very successful.
How do they find this stuff out? You mentioned voter lists, but you can't pick up all that information simply from a voter list. Where are they getting all this information from?
Some of this we've willingly given out on social media. We've put it out there.
So they'll find you on social media and then just see like how many kids you have, where you live.
Brittany, you can buy this stuff online. There's data companies who can sell you this stuff. And this is what corporations do. So they'll know your name.
Wait, yeah, now I was just going to say, I know corporations do it. I know our government does it.
Right.
But churches buy that kind of data on people too?
Why not? They're in a market space.
What?
They're in the market for souls. Your soul is a consumer. They need that to fulfill their bottom line. That data is oil. They need that information.
Jeez. Okay. Wow. This is so sophisticated. Like, this is so sophisticated. You know, I have a question. A big part of the Republican Party's rhetoric in this most recent election was around mass deportation. And, you know, I'm sure we've all seen the various times that Trump has brought up wanting to end birthright citizenship, wanting to basically completely do away with DACA. Obviously, being a Latino in America is like an extremely diverse group of people. And so I'm wondering, how do Latino evangelicals measure, in some cases, perhaps their own vulnerabilities against the rhetoric that's coming out of some of these churches and the rhetoric that's coming out of the Republican Party?
I can jump in some numbers here. You know, so when we looked at going in the election, and here again, there are huge differences between Latino Protestants and Latino Catholics. So what we found is that while all Latinos were rated like jobs, rising costs, like economic issues were like at the top of the heap for critical issues for voting in this election cycle. I think we haven't talked about that a lot, but I think that's important, that those issues loomed larger than anything else. So they may have eclipsed in some ways some of the rhetoric around immigration. But when we look at Latino Protestants and Latino Catholics, we see this very different view. So Latino Catholics, we'll start with them, very supportive of DACA, very opposed to building a wall. So they're very consistent on this part. Latino Protestants are a lot more divided.
Divided, okay.
They're supportive of DACA, about 6 in 10 support DACA, but on building a wall, they're essentially divided on that issue almost evenly. As many support it as oppose it. So when you hear that rhetoric around building a wall, it doesn't necessarily resonate in a negative way, right, among Latino Protestants in the way that it does among other Latinos like Catholics or the unaffiliated.
Interesting.
And in that space, they're also saying or believing that they're not talking about me. I think we've lumped all the Latino groups into one and call them Latinos and just dismiss their various experiences, as you just showed and suggested, that there are divisions. So a lot of times when this rhetoric comes out, it plays right into our own prejudices.
What does this change mean for the political future of the United States?
I would say I think it should not be overread as some permanent tectonic change. The most notable thing about Latinos particularly compared to white Americans, who tend to be fairly ossified in their political persuasions, the fluidity among Latinos, both Protestant and Catholic, means that this group really is more up for grabs.
It's also a warning sign to Democrats. They can't be doing what they used to do. Get out the vote, get the Latinos vote, and they're going to vote for us anyway. They're going to have to engage. And when they engage, they're going to have to hear some things they may not like about their platform.
Oh my gosh. Well, you both have completely blown my mind in this conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
That was president and founder of the Public Religion Research Institute, Robert P. Jones, and Axios Justice and Race reporter, Russell Contreras. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Our editor is
Jasmine Romero.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Bombas. Socks, underwear, and T-shirts are the top 3 requested clothing items by people experiencing homelessness. Bombas makes all 3 and donates 1 item for every item purchased. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off. This message comes from Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch. Support for NPR and the following message come from Boll & Branch. Change your sleep with Boll & Branch's airy blankets, cloud-like duvets, and breathable sheets. Feel the difference with 15% off your first order at bollandbranch.com with code NPR. Exclusions apply. See site for details.